Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And we got an episode today that I'm maybe excited for, maybe not. I'll tell you the topic. You can be the judge. 10 ways to get sued by anyone and everyone. I know. But this is important stuff. If you own a business, if you're an entrepreneur, you do not want to be in a courtroom. Take it from me. I've been there. It's no fun. And I have a very special guest with me. I'm formerly from New Jersey, a fellow New Jerseyan.
Yep.
And, I was a guest on Mitch's podcast. Actually, the day this releases, if you are listening to it, my podcast on Mitch's show is also released. It's down in the show notes below. But before we dive in, Mitch Beinhaker, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate having me on and coming on my show. It was fun.
Usually I say I'm excited to have you here. I don't know. Am I? I mean, we're talking about how to get sued by anyone and everyone.
Yeah. I mean, look, I love what I do and I love helping people. It's not as sexy as the stuff that you do with helping business owners, but there's a lot of overlap because, and one of the things we talked about on my show was about, mitigating your risk and assessing what you need to do. And I mentioned that a lot of business owners, they overlook all their, what I call governance, proper documentation, having a partnership agreement or an operating agreement, bylaws, all that type of stuff, which sometimes you need if you get a bank loan or you're dealing with other parties. And if you do get sued, the first thing a good attorney is going to ask for is those documents. And you can't go to your lawyer and ask them to commit fraud and create them for you right there, because any good lawyer is not going to do that. So you got to do those things at a time. And they're not sexy and they're not exciting, but you need to have good business practices, right? Just like that you need certain fundamentals to be successful, to build your business and do it the right way. So you have a good quality of life and you enjoy what you're doing. You have to have good practices. So it's not, it's stuff that people don't want to deal with. But if you do have good practices in place, you don't have to deal with it on a regular basis, so that includes, we talk about writing a business plan and all that kind of stuff, but it also includes, having a contract with your customers, having contracts with the vendors and the people that you deal with, making sure you know what your obligations are under agreements. If you're dealing with people in multiple states, you may want to look at things like arbitration clauses so you don't get in court. Or if you're in an industry where if something goes awry, it'd be better that it wasn't in court in public. Arbitration proceedings are private. I like arbitration and contracts. Some attorneys don't, but it's just opinions. We mentioned partnership agreements, operating agreements. There's something called a buy-sell agreement, which has to do with you and your partner want to break up. Someone dies, gets disabled, or even what I call involuntary transfers. You're getting sued and they're trying to grab your share of the business and I'm going to be stuck with this person as a creditor, or you're getting divorced and the spouse is trying to take your share of the business. Doesn't mean they're not entitled to half of what you own, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily have to become a shareholder. So all that kind of stuff. And that's what the book talks about. There's, I think we got 10 chapters. It's not all, there's sometimes we talk about insurance and we talk about different things that I've interviewed other attorneys in the book. It's not just me. And there's some bonus chapters. If you do get sued, what do you do? But that's part of if you're not doing this for just a hobby and you're just jerking around, you want to do this for real and make money, people get devastated because of mistakes they make and things they overlook. Lawsuits just, put businesses in bankruptcy. I've seen it happen. I've been involved in cases where there wasn't it was a lot of he said, she said, there wasn't a lot of evidence, a lot of testimony, and they just liked the other guy more than they liked this guy. So he got a big judgment against him and he ended up having to file for bankruptcy and go get a job. So it's real stuff that you really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's one of those things, we don't want to think about it and we don't want to prepare for all this legal stuff and the kind of downsides of it. But, it's the reason that you exist and people like you exist is because, first of all, it's necessary. And second of all, because entrepreneurs don't want to think about it. So we are playing catch up a lot of times, which the whole reason I want to put episodes out like this one, so that we actually get proactive. As you know, from on me being on your podcast, the R in Harmonious stands for RAD, risk and defense. It is a fundamental principle of doing business. So if you're listening to the show and you have no idea what Mitch just said about some of those clauses and agreements and documents,
Right.
pay close attention. And yeah, you have a book that we'll link to down in the show notes below, so you can go pick that up after you're done listening to this episode. I highly encourage it. But we don't have enough time to go super in depth. That's why you have a book. But
Right.
I want to talk about these 10 ways to get sued by anybody and everybody. Let's scratch the surface here a little bit. And you've already got my mind turning by some of the things you just said. But what are some of the most common ones that you see that you small business owners who are, they're in business, they're making money. This is the real deal. They have dozens of employees, maybe millions of dollars in revenue. What are some of the most common things overlooked that they should maybe start to think about after this episode?
Yeah. And I'll preface this by saying that in the first chapter, we talk about, not creating agreements and stuff with your by yourself, as opposed to using a professional to help you do it. Whatever. I wouldn't go to ChatGPT certainly yet and write agreements, but there is a sidebar in there about memory. And one of the reasons we run into problems is because our minds do not work like the way a court is going to expect them to work. Like it's very easy to to confuse somebody who's testifying in court, because our minds work like a box with sticky notes in it that's all stuck to the wrong things. And, we don't have perfect memory. So we always remember things differently than you and I have some business dealing. I'll remember it one way, you'll remember it another way, probably not even the total truth, somewhere in between. And so you have to document things. So one of the common things I see is people tend to do business either with people, customers, or maybe B2B, where they're buying and selling things between each other. They may have some sort of, invoices and terms and conditions, but over time they don't stay to those. They don't even know what they are, first of all. And second of all, when they do, they don't adhere to those. So it's very important that you create good practices of signing contracts and putting things in writing. I've had people say to me, if I'm with a customer or I'm trying to close a deal, I'm just not comfortable just, whipping out a piece of paper and putting it in front of them. Well, I mean, first of all, don't look at it that way. First, that's probably the first step, right? But if you're a professional, if you're a business owner, if you want to work in commerce, you have to figure a way to do that and make it comfortable for yourself. That's what we expect business owners to do. That's what we expect professionals to do, right? We don't expect somebody to ask you to sign a contract as you're checking out of the supermarket for all the goods that you're buying. But we do expect you, when you're buying a home, because that industry requires it, that we sign a contract. We do expect that if I'm hiring you to do some work like an attorney or an accountant or an architect, that we have a contract to list out what the terms are. So if there's any disagreements, or you want to terminate the relationship, or you want your money back, that you have to know what those are, especially in the B2B space, right? You have to know, you make your own deals. There's no consumer protection or anything like that. So that's probably the most important thing that I see people do, that they tend to go down the road of doing business with people and not really documenting. They think a text message and an email, and no, it's not going to do it. So you got to make it a habit of, look, as an attorney, I have to do this, right? I have to have you sign a retainer agreement. I even do it with friends, just in case I get audited and I have it in the file. That's part of my process. So it's got to be part of your process when you're dealing with somebody, that you don't skip the step of, you're so anxious to make a sale that you don't skip the step of putting it in writing in terms of what the deal is. What if it goes bad? What do you do? How do you get your money back? What's the refund policy? What's the warranties? What's the guarantees? Are there any? What representations are you making? Terms and conditions. We talked about it before. So that's the number one problem. That's like the theme of the book, is that kind of stuff. But then we get into specifics like, okay, what happens if, your partner's getting a divorce? What is that going to do to your business, and how do you protect yourself against it? We do talk about a safe work environment, dealing with your employees and having things in writing. This will probably be very timely, because I think it's coming out in September. That's going to be right about the time where the new FTC rules against using non-competition agreements are going to come into effect if they're not stopped through the courts or something like that. So you will, if you're a small business owner, you're listening to this, it's very likely in September, will not be able to enforce non-compete agreements against your employees. You can do agreement, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have agreements with your employees. How about don't solicit your customers? Don't steal your employees. Don't use confidential information like your customer list or other things you learn at work. You want to go into business against me? Fine, you can't use my stuff. So make sure that you have those agreements in place. And, and then we get into other things. But a lot of them is about following procedures, about being formal about what you do. We do talk about insurance and risk assessment. But it all comes down to right. I'm a big, boring, put everything in writing guy.
But it's so true. Like the human brain you mentioned is not set up to recall things accurately, precisely. And
Right.
that's what you need. If you're going to be in front of a judge, I mean, you need precision, you need facts, and you need the supporting data to argue your case. I was just reminded while you were saying that, my neighbor here, she ended up in court. She was suing her landscaper because he said, notice that word, said,
Right. Yeah.
that he would do a certain thing. It was like put in a certain number of bushes or whatever. And he didn't. He put in a different number, and the timeline took longer than he said
Right.
he was going to.
It was
And
all
he ended up getting
right.
sued for like $5,000. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this poor guy could have just save all that time, effort, and hassle by just putting it in writing. But I think on the small business owner side, we had talked about it. The entrepreneur is the creative. They're the free spirit, if you will,
Right.
and they're not
That's the
thinking
fun
about
stuff. Right.
contracts, because contracts are so tedious and
Yeah.
boring, and you should hire a professional. Let's put that out there. But I think the other misconception too, and I want you to speak into this, is, well, if I hand a customer an invoice and a contract and I start spelling out terms and I put arbitration clauses and they think I'm going to sue them. I mean, they're like, I'm going to scare away my customers. I can't do that. So what is the proper way to introduce this if someone's scared of maybe losing potential business or truly scaring away their customers?
I mean, obviously it depends on the industry, right? And what you're doing and so forth. But I mean, the reality is that those clauses are there for the protection of both parties, right? To make it easier to resolve disputes, to make it so things are not misunderstood. And you don't put in the wrong number of bushes, because you can look and say, listen, it says right in the contract, you're putting in 18 bushes. These were the types of trees you're putting in. This is where they're supposed to be. Here's the diagram that we put together and so forth. And the guy say, oh, you're right. I made a mistake. Because he knows that if you do end up in court, you're just going to show him the contract and say, well, look, this is what he did. Here's the pictures. This is what the contract said. And, he didn't do it. So it's important that I don't know if I have a good answer for that, except to say that you have to become comfortable with the way you do business, right? It's like sales. Everybody, I don't want to be a salesman and salesy, and they use all these bad terms. You can be we all sell. You have to become comfortable with how you develop business, with how you create relationships, with how you close deals, with how you present that stuff to people. And I'll make a quick side note, and this varies state to state. So I'm not saying this is true in North Carolina like it is in New Jersey, but a lot of states, New Jersey being one of them, have pretty strict consumer protection laws that if you're a B2C business in certain industries, like in home improvement contractors, this applies to landscapers too, that you're responsible, because you're the business owners, to know the law. And the law might say you cannot do work for a homeowner unless it's in writing. And if you screw it up, you're going to be liable for triple damages. And if you didn't do it in writing, you got to pay their attorney's fees and all this kind of egregious stuff, where the judge is not going to give you a pass because you didn't know what the law was. So, you gotta find a way to make yourself comfortable enough to bring it up, to go over the clauses, to say, listen, I just want you to know, we've had in the past, I'm sure there's never going to be a problem with us, but just in case you don't remember whatever, everything's in writing in the contract. You can always go here and look. If you think we're doing something wrong, please bring it to our attention. If we do ultimately have a dispute, we have an arbitration clause in here. So it's cheaper for you, cheaper for me, easier to resolve, because those things do happen. But that's why we do a contract, so you don't misunderstand anything and we don't misunderstand anything. And depending on your industry, you might say, here's the agreement, go take it to your lawyer, have them review it. Other ones, maybe it's not that easy to do, but at least you have it, clarified in writing, because that's where it all breaks down. I mean, it really does.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, you think about any big purchase you make, a car, a house, like there are
Yeah.
legal documents associated with it's not obviously not foreign.
Right.
I think personally it makes you look better to the customer as long as you frame it as that, like, it's for your protection. And if anything does go wrong, we want to make sure that you have your rights clearly stated and expectations clearly laid out. To me, it's no different than an invoice to say you owe me this amount of money.
Right.
And it's kind of that part two, right? Or part B,
Yeah.
like, and this is what happens if anything goes wrong.
Right.
It's
Terms
just
and
clearly
conditions. And
explained.
depending on the industry, you can do it that way. You can have terms and conditions on a contract. By the way, if anybody's listening, if you ever go buy a car, next time you buy a car, I know it's a lot and they show you a lot of papers and a lot of fine print and everything. If you really take time to read that, and you really should, there are clauses in there that say things like the dealership doesn't guarantee that they're going to give you the car that is on this contract, that they have the right to substitute, all kinds of crazy stuff that they never do because it would just be total nightmare for them. But they do have the right to do it. So you want to read something before you sign. Don't just take and just sign away. Even e-signing works. That counts. You open the box, the terms and conditions in a box, you open software or whatever. Those are binding. Like the courts have decided that commerce would come to a complete halt if those were not enforceable. So all those contracts that fall out of a box when you buy stuff, software, things like that. Yeah. You're agreeing to that by opening the box. So
all right, here's what I want to do, Mitch. So for you listening, put it in the comments if you've ever read even one of those, whether it's an e-sign, a paper that fell out of the box. Mitch, I don't think we're going to get many comments on this episode. I don't read them.
I only peripherally look at them from time to time, but I just know your risks, but yeah, if you're e-signing something, you definitely should be reading it.
That's a good tip. I might start to, but anyway,
exactly.
There might not be any comments here, but no. So I want to also ask this too, because this is an audience of small business owners, like I said, who are up and running. They're making a lot of money. They have a lot of employees.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with this type, with this type of business, are they typically coming to you in a reactive mode, like, I might be on the hook to get sued, or I think I dropped the ball, or I think I have to sue somebody, or are they typically being proactive and saying, no, I need to set up formal agreements between partners, between me and a vendor, between a customer? Where do you typically get to people?
Well, I'll tell you what I prefer, and I'll tell you what happens.
Yeah, which one you prefer?
Yeah, I prefer, and I have a lot of clients like this that I'm on a monthly retainer, and if there's extra work, there's a discount. It's a package. It's on my website, but they call me. I know their business. I know their documents. I make sure everything's set up. I might have some online vaults type of stuff for security set up for them. And when something does happen, they send it my way, and I know how to deal with it because I know exactly that they're set up. But more often than not, people do come to me with a problem. If they either, hopefully something happened to someone else they know, it didn't happen to them, and it precipitated it kind of churned the idea of, yeah, we really got to address this. And then they call me and we start fixing things up. And hopefully, I stay on as their outside general counsel or whatever and help them through stuff. But very often than not, a problem has arisen and they have not addressed the things that they need to address, the proper documentation, things like that. And they're like, I just got sued, or, my partner died and I don't know what the heck to do, or my partner just came in and doesn't want to be in the business anymore. I've seen people fight over Instagram pictures and, equipment at work. Maybe they're a bakery or something like that, and they have spoons and bowls. And it gets crazy. So if you had everything kind of like a prenup prenups are harder to do in relationships, but in business, yeah, you should probably have a prenup to say, hey, listen, we're going to give this the best shot. We're sure it's going to be wildly successful, but if it isn't, these are the rules, and those rules may change over time. I've had people come to me, Brandon, very often in family businesses, right, where maybe two of the children got involved with the business with the father and the mother, and they took over the business. And now over time, one of the kids does like 80% of the work. The other one doesn't do much, but they're 50% owners. And because they didn't put any rules in place, the guy who's doing all the work is kind of stuck. And the other kid's taking advantage and just getting his money. So, and what do? You go back to him and say, I want to renegotiate this. So forget it. You have no leverage. So yeah, those are definitely, I see that as a common problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's all things to think about and be aware of. And I have to ask, because I'm just a sucker for clickbait, but do you have a horror story, your favorite horror story over the years?
Favorite horror story I have had, because I do estates and probate also very often for business owners, but I have had, and this is unfortunately more than one occasion, where a business owner passes away, and maybe they're in the middle of a business deal or a transaction or selling the business or selling a building or something like that, and they have no will. I mean, they have nothing in writing. And it's just a mess, and the family's got to pick up. And maybe one of the reasons it happened was the stress of the whole transaction. I don't know. But those become, difficult because you have a family that might be taking things over. You might have to sell a business that you now lost an owner of. I don't know if the family's capable of running the business, and you got to deal with that. You got to deal with the courts and the probate and the heartache that the family's going through. It's like hard enough when you lose a relative, a loved one, but then have to deal with all this other stuff. That's the smallest reason why you should have everything in writing, business-wise, wills and so forth, because it's just easier on your survivors. So those are probably the most difficult cases. But I've had cases where people put money into a business, let's say small business, right? So somebody goes to you, Brandon, I got this great concept. I have this restaurant's going really well, but we need some capital. We really can't borrow it because, banks won't, they want to be no risk. So you say, sure, I'll put $150,000 into the business. You do. Maybe you and he come up with some agreement. You don't really go to a lawyer. And then over time, you're not getting any distributions from the business. It's struggling. He's not making any payments. Hey, he had told me he was going to make payments, but he mentioned it. And you got some emails and texts, and it's a mess. Those usually end up in court. So, yeah. Sometimes they're lawyers. Like I know they're lawyers who don't practice, and they're like doing their own agreements. Just really bad.
Wow. So. It's messy. Anytime you have this stuff, it's just always messy. Do it the right way. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, it's not fun. I mean, it's not sexy, but do it, and then you have one less thing on your plate.
It's important. Running a profitable, scalable business is often not sexy. That's my whole thing. You agree with that? You've got to do the fundamentals. Do it the right way.
Yeah. Or you don't do it. Go get a job and don't. You got to be a professional about it. They're gonna. When you're in court, you can't. Well, Your Honor, I mean, we were just goofing around with this and we didn't pay attention, and can you figure it out? And like, no, they're going to hold you to that as an adult.
Absolutely. Yeah. So act like one, be professional.
Yeah.
Mitch, I love this. This is, it's important. It's one of those topics that people, like I said before, people don't want to think about it. And then when they have to, they hate that they didn't think about it in advance.
Too late.
Yeah. So you have a book that we mentioned. It's linked down below if you want to go grab it. And learn about the 10 ways anyone and everyone will sue you. I think I changed the title, but
yeah, you did. 10 ways to get sued by anyone and everyone. A small business owner's guide to staying out of court.
Maybe we have to change the title in these days. I mean, you will get sued by somebody at this point.
Right.
It's just how the world's going.
Yeah. People want to take your stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is. There are predators out there that want to break you down and take your stuff. So that's why you have to do this stuff. That's why you have to protect your family, protect your business, protect your partnership. So when people try to take your stuff, it'll be harder or impossible if you do it the right way.
Yeah. And you know what? We've had episodes on that kind of stuff too, about protecting your assets. I'll link some of them down below, but I said before, the RAD, risk and defense. It is a fundamental principle of business. Mitch just said it. People do want to take your stuff. They want to take your money. Sometimes it is a dog eat dog world out there. Some people don't act with morals and ethics, and protect yourself from those people. Because if you're listening to this show, I know you're a good person. I know you have ethics, and we don't want your stuff to be taken. So Mitch, thank you for being here. Thank you for being an awesome guest. And you also, I think you have one more offer, a 4-part business plan for the audience. How do we hear about that?
Yeah. If you look at any of the business plans out there, there may be 10 to 12 different sections, but if you boil down the 4 things you need to focus on when when starting to put together a business plan, I'll just say starting, right? There's your product or service. There's your employees, personnel, whoever should be running this business. There's your marketing, marketplace, all that kind of stuff. And there's your financial. So I do have a 4-part business template. We can put a link in the show notes. I don't really have it on the website, but we were talking about I should add it. And but people can always email me. Go to mitchbeinhaker.com or beinhakerlaw.com, and I'll be happy to email it to them, and they can play around with it, do whatever they want. That'll be the start, though. It's not the end. They could put ideas and then call you, whatever. But at least it gives them something,
Mitch loves his disclaimers. It's very legal of you. I love it.
I just don't want people to think like, oh, this is great. I don't have to do anything else. That's the problem. It's always an ongoing process, right?
No, it's true. I appreciate you being here. I do love to end these episodes though with a question, but a question from you to the listener. So I believe that powerful questions get powerful answers. That's why there's an obnoxious question mark behind me. But what, in terms of what everything we talked about today and everything you do and help your clients with, what is a powerful question that the listener can walk away with and ask themselves until they get that answer in terms of thinking about the protection, the risk and defense of their business so that they can sleep confidently at night and know that some wolf can't swoop in and steal everything?
Yeah. Ask yourself, what would you do if you got sued tomorrow? Right? What would you do if you got sued tomorrow? If you're saying, I have no idea, then you better call your lawyer or find a lawyer who can work with you. I'm only in New York and New Jersey, and get and answer that question. And it'll open up a whole host of other things, but you got to have the answer. What would you do if you got sued tomorrow? Because you could get sued tomorrow. There's things lurking out there. You're dealing with people all the time. That would be my most powerful question in terms of the things you should ask yourself, and you probably won't have a good answer. I'm gonna venture a guess.
Yeah, let's take it from me, from someone who has had to answer that question because it happened and I wasn't proactive.
Right.
Please ask yourself that question and answer it. You're going to want to answer it ahead of time.
Yeah, and the answer is not nothing.
No, don't do nothing.
Nothing. You'll end up with a judgment against yourself.
Yeah. I love it. This has been a great episode. Answer that question and think about it. And wherever you're watching and listening, we appreciate you being here. Make sure you subscribe. And normally I would say leave a comment, but I feel like we're not going to get any on this episode because we asked you about reading terms and conditions. But comment, interact with it. That's how we get this show to more small business owners like yourself. We love bringing these episodes to you every single day of the week to help you get just a little bit better and get those little truth nuggets to help you grow your business. We'll see you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.